All right. Hello, everyone. We are coming back and settling in for the next panel to begin. But before we do, I just wanted to do a quick review. We have been talking about San Antonio and the ICSI for so long. I think you should just see it and help you kind of orient yourself to the program. We have several really cool pictures. We did the tour together several times to identify how they went through this whole journey. But see for yourself. So this is the center we are talking about in San Antonio that was built by the public, by the ISD. They raised a bond and they converted this Walmart into this amazing institute. It's a magnet institute. So basically, you have to apply. High school students have to apply for it, and they have to get there. But incredible vision from the community, and okay, I think there is voice there too. So.
And I think it's going to attract a lot of students that are interested in cyber, which is a great thing.
We're super excited. I'll tell you, it's been a long time sort of working on this project. The facility is brand new, as you can see behind me. It looks fantastic.
I just looked at the room. I'm like, oh my gosh! Just like I was amazed. It was so cool.
Across the board, not just the monitors on the walls.
This is Josh Beck, the instructor. He's been there for the last 4 or 5 years.
Definitely a great way for me to prepare for my future career.
This is the coolest place I've ever been in my life. It's absolutely
yeah.
Amazing.
It really is.
And can you imagine this? Like high school students from 8th grade, they opened it up for 8th grade this year. Earlier it was 9 to 12. This opened up for 8th grade.
That's super cool, and my dad does it too. And I'm like,
so this is one center. They take the students from the class, from the school. They take them to the center. They spend whatever time they have in the class, and then they can go back to their home school.
To sort of break systems and fix them and build them in here. It's about operating system configuration, management, and hardening. For large part, we teach a lot of networking fundamentals in here as well. We also have a lot of very robust virtualization resources where the students get to work with industry standard software and frameworks. We're excited to see these kids, and we're ready to rock and roll.
Yeah. So this video is up available on ICSI on YouTube. Just look for Northeast ISD ICSI. This will come up and give you a little bit of orientation of this. Again, many adults and SOC analysts would just fight each other to get to that center that these high school kids are going to. And this all started with the vision for bringing advanced resources to the community, raised by a bond, so it's paid by the public. So they want to utilize this. There are 360 students that were enrolled in this center when we visited there last year, and there's more. I think another 120 or so are coming up this year, additional. So it's just amazing resource, and I think there is no doubt that this cannot be replicated in other places. It can amazing be. All right. So for the next panel, I would like this is another industry that we have been closely watching for the last several years. I personally have spent my time in the vehicle security and automotive security and intelligent transportation systems, and have a deep attachment to this. And for the automotive security, as you can imagine, any car today, whether it's a EV or or a gas vehicle, doesn't really matter. They're very, very connected and digitally managed. There has been, and this is just not today. It's been there for a long time, but it's definitely a lot of hard work from some of the leaders here we're going to be hearing from to get the industry together to work on cybersecurity. And for I'll not go into the details. I'll let Catherine introduce the panel, and then the panelists speak for themselves. This is going to be another really eye-opening. If you have not been paying close attention, please do. Okay, thank you, Catherine. Come on.
So we're going to, this panel has been one that it's been really interesting through, kind of calls with these three individuals to learn just how much is going on, not only in the industry, but in the greater Ottawa area as it relates to automotive, cybersecurity, and innovation. When we were in San Antonio, again, last year, we were talking a lot about San Antonio. One of our keynotes was Joost de Vries, and Joost is the CEO of DeLorean. And many of you probably know DeLorean name from Back to the Future. But DeLorean had just launched, literally weeks before our summit, their new line of cars. And it was really interesting. His presentation talked about his years in the automotive industry, and when they went back to the proverbial drawing table to redesign DeLorean 2.0, he said very quickly in the process, he started to realize that cars are now mobile computers. And it changed the whole way in which they looked at the design and development process. In the greater Ottawa area, and I do sometimes think that Ottawa is a little bit too bashful about the extent of innovation. There's been a lot going on. There's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Richard Yu who couldn't be with us. He's actually on leave from Carleton University and out of country at the time, but I think this was post-pandemic, maybe 5 years ago or so, was invited to Carleton University to watch him and his students. It was a demo, but how him and his students could hack into autonomous vehicles and basically take over control of them. And they did it very quickly and very astutely. Also in the greater Ottawa area, and BlackBerry QNX has played a tremendous part in this. There's been a lot of innovation through LSpark and the work that you folks have done with LSpark in terms of building a really strong and compelling story. We're going to hear from Divyanshu about what's going on with Area X.0. So I'm really looking forward to this panel. We're going to kind of look at from various aspects. So kind of Faye, from your perspective, obviously, and Faye, for those of you who haven't had the pleasure of meeting Faye, Faye is the executive director of the Auto ISAC and represents how many members? 80? Okay. So, Faye, there's as we talked about, there's no denial that the intersection between innovation and technology in the automotive industry has created opportunity, but it's also created some risk. What are some of the issues and strategies that you see not only the Auto ISAC, but your members talking about right now?
Well, there's a number of, it's green.
Is it? No?
There we
Yeah,
go.
there we
Yeah,
go.
it's on now. Sorry. So anyway, good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here and to support this event. Thank you. So I joined the Auto ISAC over 7 years ago. And the Auto ISAC, the automobile manufacturers came together. There were 14 of them that said, gee, we got a lot of lines of code in this vehicle, over 100 million lines of code. And at the time, there was 30 million in the 787. I was at Boeing. I stood up an aviation ISAC. The Department of Transportation suggested, kind of nudged the 14 automakers to say, what are you doing about cyber? This is starting to look like an IoT device, this automobile, and how are you managing that? And so they came and talked to me, and I supported them. They hired Booz Allen. They stood up a corporation in literally 1 month after the GPAC. If anybody knows when that was 2015 in July, and they incorporated in August. And it wasn't because of that GPAC, although it was serendipitous that it was at the same time. And the 14 automakers came together and said, what do we need to do? But they wouldn't even look to the right or to the left because they're so competitive, right? So we really had a challenge at getting everyone to sort of even be willing to talk. And that 14 has gone to 80. Basically, in the early days, what we decided to do is to look at this as an educational opportunity. It was very obvious that we had brilliant automotive engineers throughout the industry, but they didn't know a hoot about cybersecurity. That engineering V somehow missed the security elements in it, the embedded systems pieces. And so we really needed to go back to understanding the basics, and we did. We built 7 best practice guides. The members built those 7 best practice guides. They go from everything from secure by design all the way through the full life cycle, including partnerships and engagement and the ISAC. So those best practices were finished up in about 2017. We decided at that point to let's start a members teaching members activity where those that have implemented those best practices would come forward and share those. And that was really painful initially for a lot of the competitors, but they did. And it was awesome to hear them talking to each other. The best compliment I got was a Ford guy said to me one day, you know, Faye, I would never have talked to my counterpart at GM. Today I feel comfortable I can talk to him. And I know what and how I can talk to him. So it's really worked well. They built those best practices. They've looked at those. The folks that built those are the same folks that built your 21434 ISO SAE standard for cybersecurity engineering in vehicle. And now we are looking at, to fast forward to answer your question, they're doing an awful lot. We have remained on the education piece. I really appreciated yesterday and all that CompTIA has done, and many of you in Purdue University and those dialogues yesterday. This is an education process. It is a skill and labor issue as well, as we just heard from the previous group of folks. So we recognized that we needed to do training. We had no money in 2017, 2018, 2019. We go to NHTSA. NHTSA is the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, who is the regulator of those OEMs in the US. And they said, we'll give you a cooperative grant, go build a cybersecurity automotive training program. So if you go to our website, automotiveisac.com, you will see what those are. We have a series of fundamental courses. There's 3 basic tracks. The basic is very basic, and it would be applicable to anybody doing cybersecurity. The second one is secure engineering, very specific to in-vehicle and automotive, although there's some generalities around it. Third element is for the managers who are managing these highly technical people and all the challenges that go therein, and funding and keeping staff and keeping them engaged. And so there is one on that, and of course policy. Then we have an advanced training. That advanced training is being held at the ACM. You'll hear from Divvy in a minute because he has a counterpart up here in Canada. We do real on-hands training in person for a week, 4 advanced courses to help them understand how to actually, hack the vehicle as well as how to build it better. So they've done an awful lot. The other thing they've done from an education perspective, they've taken the MITRE ATT&CK matrix, and we've decided that's very, very IT, OT focused. And we have built an automotive ISAC matrix, ATM automotive threat matrix, that will be published and will be out for the world, for all of industry to use next month. Again, the members have built all of this. The other thing they started to look at this last couple of years has been on SBOM, and Chris can talk a little bit about that because Chris is a very active member and has some solutions in BlackBerry that can help with the SBOMs. But SBOMs are software bill of materials. They're very relevant because it gets into what is in your software. If you need to do a patch, you need to know what software version you have, right? So SBOMs do that, whereas today, most of what is delivered to the OEM is considered proprietary, and that information is not given to them. So if we do have something like a GPAC, the OEM has to go down the supply chain to figure out what to do about it. So we need to work that collaboratively, and we can see a lot of really great engagement across the community. It's been a long journey, but they're doing an awful lot.
Wow.
Thank you.
That's tremendous, Faye. Chris Sinnott, who is Senior Director of Engineering with BlackBerry QNX, and I'll admit, Chris, I still miss my BlackBerry phone. So I remember when John Chen came out and said that BlackBerry was going to become a cybersecurity company. And I think for some of the industry, there was a little bit of head scratching at the time. Fast forward to now, and there is no doubt that BlackBerry QNX is probably one of the industry world-class leaders in terms of automotive software. From your perspective, and Faye talked about, the matrix and all the things that have happened to become, mitigate and manage that risk. How does that impact the development process from conceptual to the delivery of the technology?
Yeah, look, I think it's fundamental to the way that we plan and build technology at QNX. And for those of you looking for a BlackBerry, I'm selling them out of the back of my car because I get that a lot. I got you. But in all seriousness, I think in terms of the penetration of QNX, the operating system that is at the heart of a lot of automotive systems, we're in about upwards of 250 million vehicles, which is pretty amazing. Yeah. And predominantly the safety systems are what we are running because we're a safety certified OS. And that, of course, ties back to cyber, because when you're talking about cyber, you're talking about risk. And when you're talking about risk, of course, there's business risk, but in a safety system, there's also, risk to human life. And so that kind of creates a very a seriousness about the way that we develop and plan. And I think the other thing that we're focused on, I guess, is really understanding how we fit into the complex supply chain and how, what are our problems, what are our customers' problems, what are the OEM's problems, and this is where collaborating with other industry members through the ISAC has been fantastic for us, because it's a learning, it enables us to learn and really share as well our plans and bounce ideas and stuff. And this is fundamental to the way that we de-risk the software that we provide. In terms of what we're doing technically today, like what activities we're doing that are trying to reduce that risk, we are developing a new version of our operating system that has a cybersecurity strategy that we're developing, based on the learnings of our participation with the ISACs. Faye was talking a little bit before about the SBOM, which is essentially your ingredients list of the software that you have, and it's one of the most fundamental pillars to having a proper cybersecurity strategy, because if you don't know what's in your product, then it's going to be very, very difficult to protect it. And the enemy of security is really complexity. And this, as Faye was also mentioning, there's nothing as complex as a car. Even airplane systems are a fraction of the complexity of a modern automobile. And so that comes down to understanding how we share information with our customers. Our operating system doesn't come really pre-baked. It's a configurable piece of technology. And that means we need to work in conjunction with our customers to help them understand exactly which parts of it they have switched on, how that affects the risk profile, how that affects the attack surface of the software itself, and how, what safety cases are relevant to that attack surfaces. And there's various methodologies. I mean, we could talk for hours about that, but in general, I'd say this is where we have very focused teams the way we're looking is building a cyber-aware culture, which is something I think we've done pretty successfully at BlackBerry. Yep. Putting processes in place to help us and our customers comply with new regulations and standards like 21434, which is a very important cybersecurity standard for automotive. And then building technology that is resilient and able to withstand attacks. And so that's really our focus, I guess.
And quick question I have for you to that process, and maybe to all of you, and as it's just top of mind right now, is in that education process, as you educate each other within the industry, how important does it become to educating the end user, the consumer, the one that's going to get in the car? Because I could tell you right now, if, even some cars I get into now I'm very confused by a Tesla. Love them, but very confused. How important is it going to become to educating that end user how to safely use that technology?
Yeah, look, I mean, if you look at where handheld devices are in terms of the number of updates you're getting, and you're dealing with those updates, which are largely patches for vulnerabilities. I think the automotive industry is still a little bit behind that. It's not like your car is updating 3 times a week. Maybe Tesla is the exception to that. But I think that getting to a level of sophistication with technology is a challenge that automakers face today, and they're still trying to build that expertise within the organizations. And I think that's the point at which you have the most overlap with the consumer experience in terms of how they operate their vehicle and ensure safety and so forth. I mean, it's something that is that the nature is changing. It's changing at a fast rate, and so the public have to kind of keep up with that. I had a 69 Alpha when I left Australia in my 20s. I love that car. And I didn't have any cyber issues with that car because it didn't have any software. But that's certainly not the case today.
Cyber is everyone's responsibility, and I think an educated consumer is as important as all of us being educated. I bought a Lexus because I had a dumb car when I joined the Auto ISAC, and I thought, well, it's time to buy one that's connected, right? At least somewhat connected. So I bought a beautiful Lexus 2015. It was I think 2 years old. And they showed me how to upload my iPhone into it. And I went in, paid the check, got back in the car, hit home. And it took me all these back roads to somebody else's home, probably the previous user's home. And when I looked a little deeper, guess what? His credit card information was there. Oh boy. So make sure if you rent a car or if you are selling your car to take your data off. We know the key fob actions, right? So I wrap my my key fob in aluminum foil to create that Faraday cage every night. Kia, we had terrible things happening in my city with Kia and Hyundais being stolen. So the number one cybersecurity threat for automotive is theft, right? But please make sure your data is taken off of your rental cars and if you sell your car.
Yeah.
Those were excellent. Right. Well, good morning, everyone. I think it's still good morning. My name is Divi Kamboj. I just want to add a couple of points. I think that's an excellent topic of I would say technology communication in general. I'm an engineer by trade. It's very critical, I think, to actually get the nuances communicated in the right fashion to the general public who's consuming these technologies. A lot of times the expectations from the technologies are not always aligned with what it can actually do. So I think sometimes we under or either overestimate what connected and autonomous vehicles perhaps would be able to do. And I think all the points raised in terms of education and training and then development. So what we do at AreaX.O, we are it's a 1,800 acres of farmland. So it's an enclosed, private and gated facility that we have here in Ottawa. We are located at Woodruff and Hunt Club in Nepean. And the purpose of the facility is to have a secure environment where you can evaluate and test all these cybersecurity solutions. There are multiple programs that are ongoing at AreaX.O where we are able to bring together different industry collaborators. BlackBerry is a key industry collaborator for us at AreaX.O, where we are able to physically execute use case scenarios, test sequences, and understand where the systems would fail, right? So I think when we look at education and training, having secure and a modular environment like we have at AreaX.O enables to set up test bed environments where some of these technologies can be tested all the way from the ECU level and then up the topology chain where you have different attack surfaces for a vehicle. It could be from vehicle to V2X communication is one domain. So we are looking to kind of understand where these systems would fail and how they would actually behave in the real world deployment. So maybe that's kind of my 2 cents, and then over to you.
Well, maybe, and to continue that on, and you can, maybe when we kind of met pre-panel, you kind of talked about some of the collaboration, and the theme of this year's summit is progress through partnership. And we've heard, yesterday we heard from various sectors and initiatives, and we're seeing that. That's all very enlightening and encouraging. But you've got some interesting, I think it was it Ministry of Transport or?
Exactly. So we have, well, we recently completed a program with Transport Canada, ERSTPP, Enhanced Road Safety Transport Payment Program. I don't think I butchered it. So that was the one that was completed recently this past summer, and we have submitted the report with Transport Canada as well. The objective of that particular test campaign was understanding vulnerable road user safety, specifically as it relates to connected and autonomous vehicles at traffic intersections. So we have a simulation environment at AreaX.O where we are able to simulate those use case scenarios in a software environment, then qualify the ones that we would like to physically implement at a test bed, at a test bed infrastructure, and then also then interpret those same use cases, how those would be deployed in a public setting. And we have a public deployment, a public site as well, where we are able to test and evaluate these technologies. So with Transport Canada, and there's another program we're working on, which is the Rail Safety Improvement Program. The objective of that program is to deploy infrastructure-based machine vision sensors and then V2X technologies to communicate latency critical information to the vehicles. You could have a situation at railroad crossing, and this is specifically in a multimodal environment. You could have a situation where the vehicle would potentially get stuck in the middle of the rail tracks. You could have a queuing situation right, in front of the rail tracks after the danger zone. So would it be safe for the autonomous vehicle to pass? So those are the, from a critical infrastructure perspective, that's the communication that's happening between the vehicle and the infrastructure. So I think those use cases we are able to physically test in the field and understand where those different integration points are, coming about, and where some of the vulnerabilities can be exposed into the overall system. Right. So I think that's those are the two examples that come to mind. And I think there's always, the way at least I see that there's, different tiers of cybersecurity. We mentioned some of the ISO standards, and then you go up the, software stack and the hardware stack. You then realize that it also then envelopes the ITS domain, the intelligent transportation system domain, and how the traffic controllers would then interpret the information from the vehicles, right? So there's a very hub and spoke sort of a architecture that comes about, and we have to understand where those vulnerabilities reside and how we can counter it.
So we've referenced it a bit, but we'll dig down into the whole concept of the, secure by design. And we as a community, we've talked about this over the years in a lot of different veins and industries. And CISA came out earlier this year and kind of put their flag in the sand around secure by design. Jenny Easterly, recently said consumer safety must be at the front and center of all phases of technology product lifecycle, with security designed in from the beginning. So as one side of the table looks at how the innovation can be used, the other side of the table should be looking at how it can be misused, which is, I'm sure, Chris, it's a change in the whole development process. But what do you think the automotive industry is doing really well in that vein, and what areas of opportunity to do better can be? And I'll kind of open it up to the three of you. And I'll even expand that, Divi, to even other areas, because I know with Area X.0, you're working with drones and air defense and that stuff, but autonomous or connected vehicles, what do you think is going well, and what are the opportunities to do better in the future?
I can start off. So I think that so there's when you're talking about innovation, I think in some respects things like safety and cybersecurity are acting in a different direction to innovation, or can be, and that's challenging. That's the very nature, because safety systems, cybersecurity systems, you want to have a lot of control and oversight, and a huge amount of testing and a huge amount of effort going into making sure things work exactly the way that they're designed. Whereas innovation, you want to have experimentation and the ability to free think, and so that's a challenge that is faced by the OEMs today. I think that what they're doing well, I think, is that they are taking over really. So even with electronic components within vehicles, it used to be that they were assembled as, you know, in a kind with a hardware mindset. So you would have a system that would check your blind spot and activate a light if there was somebody in your blind spot, and then there could be another system that would I don't know, automatically control the windscreen wipers or whatever. And these was all sold with originally just hardware components, and then as they got smarter, electronic control units that would control those hardware components. And that was all just kind of pasted together. And really the innovation of those systems and the complexity of the software was handled by the tier one step up the supply chain. What I think OEMs are trying to do now, and it's partly to compete with companies like Tesla that are really a software mindset company, is to take over the whole ecosystem of the car and control it from one specific central compute zone. And that makes the computing more complex. It makes, it's a challenging thing for a company that's been building stuff by pasting parts together in the past. Where I think that could be improved is, rather than everybody, every single company doing their own systems, I think that that it could improve by converging and having centralized compute platforms that would provide most of the abilities, and then the way that you tune that platform is how you compete within the market. And why I think that would help is because in order to secure and safety certify systems of that complexity, it's better if the whole industry is kind of collaborating to get one thing right than everybody going, in their separate directions.
Does it, and kind of all three of you, because somebody in conversation last over a couple of days referenced, IoT, security was kind of treated as a bolt-on, because as we learned, it's difficult to secure a device or a piece of technology after the fact. But the nature of the software industry has always been, and government procurement as well, there's either project timelines and budgets attached to a project, or in the software case, it's speed to market, speed to revenue, right? Putting the secure by design, especially at the infancy stage, can sometimes slow down the procurement process and slow down the going to market strategy. Is that a pain point, Faye, for the industry, or do you think everybody within the automotive industry just understands it's the reality of secure by design?
Yeah, I think Chris hit on really two key points to answer that question. One is that this is a mechanical industry that's now IoT, right? And so that shift has been happening. It's been happening over the last decade. It's continuing to happen, and it is needed. And his second point about having a secure platform, one that they invest in and agree upon, that's built by industry, I think makes a lot of sense. However, their competitive nature is just against that. I see them struggle with that idea. Even the key fob idea. Can't we just get some agreement on how we're going to do these key fobs so that they're secure and consistent across the industry? And we couldn't. So I think it's just the nature of the industry. I hold out hope, but I think it is very difficult to get the industry together to agree on that. I'd rather see them compete on cup holders and fancy designs in the inside the vehicle, but not the embedded systems. It's just really hard to do this, and it costs a lot of money, as QNX knows. And so I think it really makes a lot of sense to do it that way. But will it happen? I think there's cultural wins against it.
I think my prediction on that is that it won't happen coming out of an OEM. If we're going to see that, it's going to come out of Amazon or Google or Microsoft, or even BlackBerry, somebody that's doesn't have that doesn't force Ford to buy GM's platform.
And I think from the Area XO vantage point, it's the testing and evaluation of such diverse ecosystem of architectures that are being developed, right? How, from a regulatory or policy perspective, how do we have a standardized way to assess the safety of these systems that are being put on the streets, right? Like, and this is perhaps understanding the operational design domain of a vehicle platform. Somebody doing autonomous vehicle in California is very different than someone doing autonomous vehicle in Ottawa, right? Like just the weather environment, having a 12-month operation, how to do that reliably, that's equally important. So I think from testing and evaluation perspective, understanding what's the black box boundary that we're defining to evaluate and understand how we can assure, not guarantee perhaps, but assure safety for these systems as they get commercialized. And yeah, I think all the points mentioned, it's important to have. So we have at the ECU level and software development level, there are standards that are being developed. You mentioned a couple of them already. WP29, that's a global effort happening to advance the cybersecurity standards and have a broader adoption for these standards across the ecosystem, across the OEMs. I think we also need to understand how this will be penetrating into the society and what are the different layers of, I gave example of ITS, traffic operations, city authorities, municipalities, how they can be an equal stakeholder into the actual commercialization of these technologies. I think there's a role for industry to play for sure, but I think a site like Area XO where you have industry partners, you have academia partners, and you have policy and regulators from their vantage point, they're all able to provide different lens through which we can then evaluate the cybersecurity postures. So I think that's kind of, I'm enjoying the comments, and I think this is something that we'll have to have a contained way of evaluating how we take this one, and do this performance evaluation at scale.
I think we also have to remember that these vehicles are mobile global devices, and coming off of these vehicles back to the OEM are, petabytes of data. And so then you have all of that as well, right? And so bringing in the IT as well as, of course, the manufacturing side is a critical element. And it took me 5 years to get the IT and OT into the auto ISAC. So those have to be integrated functions, right? And examining that and how we protect that, all done a little bit differently across the whole industry. It's that competitive nature that wins.
So, and we ask this question a lot to industries that we collaborate, and we talked about it, how we can support the healthcare industry. That discussion was there yesterday. How can the cybersecurity industry support automotive and transportation innovation in your mindset?
Well, I think there's an awful lot to learn from the cybersecurity industry, and that's one of the reasons we built the training program. What are the basics? How do you do basic encryption? I mean, I know that sounds silly. Antivirus is all the different types of software that are already out there and readily understood by IT professionals, right? That had to be integrated into this embedded systems approach. There's additional needs and training needed for embedded systems. As we all know, those get complex quickly. The architecture does matter. As we saw in the GPAC, there were 4 entry points that they got through using a Sprint network all the way down into the infotainment system to take over the control of the vehicle at 70 miles an hour on a St. Louis highway. Those researchers were able to do that because we had not built in design, security in design at the time. And if we had followed the NIST Cybersecurity Framework 1.0, which was available at the time, any one of those 4 nexus points would have stopped the attack, but we hadn't. So there's been a lot of learning in the industry. I will say I'm amazed at how quickly they've come up to speed. They've integrated in the skills and ability from the IT cyber world. They're learning, they're hiring. I've seen the shift. It's been an amazing journey to watch in 7 years how much they have matured, but there's still runway.
Something that I've seen that's been important, I think, with the work that Faye's been doing, is just bringing other industry or industry leaders and experts from military security or even like the C kind of services from the US government in to talk and share the kind of cyber-rich culture that they have and ways of thinking about vulnerability reports and dealing with the day-to-day, and sharing information about what's going outside the industry as well, which helps to build an understanding within the automotive industry, I think. So.
We do have a very strong partnership program. For instance, our partnership is with ACM. We probably need to have one too, Divi, but at the end of the day, we do embrace our partners. We also are in partnership with CISA, with Jen Easterly's team. In fact, our vice chair is on her advisory committee. We do work with them. They bring in incredible talent. We have a data feed from them, so we can get the IOCs automated and all of that good stuff. So we're working very closely with CISA. It is part of the partnership of an ISAC, the public-private partnership that we talked about earlier. Very important partnership to support the industry and for them to get eyes on other industries like aviation and like some of the other ones that have been there, done that kind of thing to learn.
I echo both comments here, and I think, and you mentioned, Catherine, like just in terms of different verticals that have similar challenges, right? Like we are doing connected autonomous vehicles, that's ground-based vehicles. The same argument could be for drones. Those are aerial platforms. So from threat assessment and remediation, I think everything to everything is the communication scheme that needs to be evaluated for cybersecurity, fitness. I think that's kind of the key trait for a site like AreaXO, where you have a common backbone of an infrastructure, and then you're able to power multiple verticals, and then set up, testbed environments where a specific threat can be assessed in a much more granular fashion, right? Like, so something like I mentioned V2X communications. So we are currently, we have successfully deployed BlackBerry's Certicom's security credential management system, SCMS. So that's primarily for the critical infrastructure, rail crossings, four-way traffic intersections. Somebody can actually, attempt to fiddle with that. So I think that's what we are trying to understand from different verticals, both ground-based, drones, and different use cases. Even in smart farming, we have autonomy solutions, connected solutions in smart farming as well. All of them have similar challenges, and how can we pool the subject matter expertise to solve those challenges?
Well, I just wanted to add one more thing to my earlier comments, and I know they're in the audience. Health ISAC is here. FS ISAC folks have been here. We work together with the other ISACs. We get every one of the reports daily, at 24 or so reports every day. We did a joint report with Health ISAC last July. We published it this past July on generative AI, for instance. So the ISACs also are working together. Very important, because they hit one industry, then they continue to hit another. And so all of these learnings, what Divi's doing, what Chris is doing, and bringing that in and bringing our partners together really is needed to build that resiliency.
That's fantastic. Chris, Faye, Divi, congratulations. This is a shining example of how progressive the industry has pushed forward in terms of collaboration. So kudos to you guys.
Thank you.
Sure. Sure.
So like you just talked about generative AI, and you were talking about confusion for users, for new technology, Catherine. What are your thoughts on Mercedes-Benz bringing in ChatGPT for voice assistance for customers?
Wow.
Well, it's not my place to make a comment on Mercedes-Benz, but I would say that the whole industry is looking at generative AI. They have to. That's the next stage. We all know that there are some challenges with it. We, in fact, just had a speaker come in to talk about that last week to our CISOs. We have a CISO executive working group, and one of our CISOs got up and also explained what they're doing. So it's not just Mercedes. They're all looking at it. They're all working on it, and they have to. I think it's going to be a journey. It's like any new technology that comes into the foreplay. We have to examine it. We have to play with it before it actually gets fielded.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenges probably most understand is just figuring out how to put guardrails on those systems. And really it's up to the pioneers of those systems that built them to try to do that. But it's not, I mean, it has to be within their interests to do so. So I think this is why you see quite a lot of leaders coming in and business leaders coming in and actually calling for a little bit more regulation on that industry. I think at this point we're fumbling though as to what exactly that entails and what it means, because it's such new cutting edge technology. It's very difficult to understand how you regulate that, or even if the designers of the systems can't work out how to put the guardrails, how do you regulate the guardrails? I guess.
Yeah, otherwise it'll be lawsuits.
Indeed.
Didier, any closing comments?
One thought I want to add to that is I think that's maybe a two-part question. So, when we say having Mercedes-Benz, they are introducing, or any other OEM for that matter, you have the AI solution that needs to be assessed through its own cybersecurity challenges, and then perhaps the data that it is leveraging from the vehicle stack, right? So I think maybe also understanding that layer, because something like BlackBerry Ivy is a good candidate for that, where you abstract the information from the vehicles, different ECUs, and how do you make that available to other third-party users in a very standardized and consistent fashion. And the question is authentication by at source, right? So if the data is being immersed outside the vehicle domain for other consumers to include in their use cases and applications like generative AI, like how do we guarantee that secure layer is being handled in a best practice fashion across different OEMs, right? So I think there's AI development which has its own cybersecurity challenges, and then how does that integrate into the vehicle stack?
So that's a segue into our next panel, actually. But one thing I do want to mention is, speaking of ECUs and the flat network that is there in cars, it's very important to take a look at that holistic view of cybersecurity risk and how it plays with the external data points, such as OSG and
Absolutely. Yep.
I'm good.
Sure.
All right, and that was a fantastic discussion. I'm sure there are many takeaways, and I'm sure you have more questions, but we'll keep this program going, and we'll get you to lunch on time today so that we can have further discussions there. So without further ado, I wanted to invite the next panel upstage. We'll have... Okay. So Pamela, Soumya, Errol, welcome to this really forward-looking discussion. We kicked off the responsible and secure AI a couple of months back, and I think it's now probably July. So, this was a little bit of reactive stance from us. I'll be candid with you. We typically don't react to the incidents, but the Gen AI piece, the way it accelerated the entire discussion and has activated, every part of, the society, country, education, industrial organization, everybody's really using it. But AI has been there for a long time. It's not new, but the way it's reaching and impacting lives directly and being used is definitely new. So, before this, I founded another organization, co-founded with a number of our friends called Cloud Security Alliance. And there have been a lot of trends coming and going since we got together, like 12 or 13 of us got together and put this Cloud Security Alliance back in 2008 fall, and 2009 it became a real organization. That's another fantastic organization you should look up. 150,000 members around the world. Jim Reeves, who's actually meeting in Seattle with his members the same day, is another resource that you should tap into. But I feel the same way almost after a decade, more than a decade, about AI. And we really want to, if there is a technology and with a socioeconomic and geopolitical, you name it, impact, we will take a deep dive into it. So in this panel, we're going to talk about our work and our mission, how it aligns with the work that we are going to do in this particular working group. And we cannot do this alone. And then I'll put a little bit of my CISO hat on here, because I really had to, dig into things to find resources to answer the call of business. And the day or the couple of days that we went to the Gen AI exploration, we put together a SWAT team to address the security. That was the first interest from the board, from our PE firm, New Mountain Capital, and the CEO. Everybody got together, and we put together a security, privacy, and legal team that is actually the front end of most of the work they're doing in Gen AI at Acolyte and New Mountain. From the CFF side, I thought this would be an amazing opportunity for us to explore the role of cyber beyond cyber and security. I just had a quick chat with our esteemed panelists here about the role of the defender. We talked about the modern CISO yesterday, but in general, the role of the defender and the practitioner has been primarily quite defined. It's still going through its own dynamics, but I'd say it's quite defined. But there is a lot more beyond security that needs to be dealt with, right? And I can't claim to understand the implications or the nuances of the technological nuances of LLMs and how they're implemented, how one is different from the other. It's hard to tell. Everybody is a Gen AI company all of a sudden, right? It starts with I'm a very process geek, so to speak. I want to make sure that we agree on a process, and then we follow it and we iteratively improve it, because without a defined process, it's very hard to do things in an organized fashion and also scale and have a real impact on the business and probably broader society or organizations, whether it's government or private. So we looked at what do the defenders do now, which most of us fairly understand in this room, but what the defenders need to look forward to, right? Whether it's privacy or its legal implications. So we put together this working group. We had a kickoff, webinar to solicit the issues and challenges that the security professionals have to deal with, and then reached out to a number of our colleagues. And the first iteration of this call for help was not really very encouraging, as we didn't find a lot of women in AI. And honestly, I really thank Janet. I think mentioning about the panels and the working groups and everything, I couldn't have done that working group without reaching out to the real diverse input that we need. So in this journey, we reached out to many different organizations. One of them I would have to give a shout out to is the Women in AI Initiative. Those amazing partners, and they're globally, they're globally present. If you want to check out, they have a very strong Canadian presence, and they jumped in. So now I think we are equipped with the right partners to actually kick this off. It typically takes about a month or two to get real traction amongst all the busy people and their schedules that need to be. You heard about Cyber Board Book yesterday. It took us 3 months to get that going, but we had 40 consecutive sessions, almost with the same group meeting every week. So I believe the next iteration on this project, also on phase 2 of Cyber Board Book, would be probably similar. And in this panel, we would like to explore with my co-panelist here as to what should we be delving on. What are the big rocks? If we were to write 6 chapters to guide the CISOs or the cyber defenders, what should we be focusing on? And those understanding are essential for our work product. So please welcome. I'll start with the introductions, and Somaya, we can go probably from you. I think it has to flick it up. Yep, there it is.
Shall I start? Okay, I can hear it. Okay. Hello, everyone. Very happy to be here. So my name is Sumaya Nikbor. So we are talking about career journey. Well, maybe I can talk about mine. I started mine on a PhD economics track to become actually a professor in economics. But while I was finishing my PhD, I realized I'm more interested in AI and machine learning. So I started kind of teaching myself machine learning and AI, and started my first job as a data scientist about 9 years ago, and continued working in that space for the past decade, I guess. Currently, I am the lead for the data science and AI at Transport Canada, but I'm also very passionate about responsible AI and volunteer my time and expertise to various working groups and communities in Canada and outside of Canada. But I'm also the adjunct research professor at Colton University and teach the course on responsible AI. So I'll pass it to my next.
All right, good morning, everybody. Errol Weiss, I'm Health ISAC's Chief Security Officer. I want to thank Faye for ruining my day. I have to wonder how much data I left on my last car that I sold. I don't think you ended up at my house, but I do wonder how much data was still in that car. So lesson learned now. In terms of AI, again, from the Health ISAC perspective, we've got about 800 institutional members globally. We're in 100 countries around the world. We have been looking at AI, LLMs, ChatGPT, you name it, largely from a security issue, and we'll get into that in a little later, but then also in terms of what should the CISOs be thinking about, what should the boards be asking. And I think jokingly, I would say, Val, if we have to fill that chapter out in the book right now, it's probably going to be pretty blank. You know, it's like we don't know the answers yet, so there's a lot of unknown right now. So we're getting there, but we'll ask a lot of good questions in the meantime, I think. So that's my interest in the topic right now. Pam?
Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. So I'm Pamela Gupta. I'm President and CEO of Trusted AI. I am an ex-CISO, not a recovering CISO, but an ex-CISO. And 4 years ago, I started taking a look at, the mindset has been, I come from a background of creating risk-based programs for Fortune 50s and Fortune 500s. It's always to anticipate what is coming down the pike for business and how are we going to enable them. So 4 years ago, I started taking a look at what do we need to secure AI, and quickly realized that cybersecurity as we know it for conventional systems is radically different for protecting AI systems, firstly. And cybersecurity by itself is not going to be enough to secure AI. And by that, I mean, when you look at the triad that AI security stands on is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And these three by themselves are not going to be sufficient for protecting AI because these systems have a very different way of building. So, how you create a software system and you create a machine learning system, for example, is by training, giving it data and giving it data that is relevant to building your use case and your outcome. So if we take a look at COVID, what happened? We have a model built for e-commerce, for example, pre-COVID. And what happened during COVID, right, where everything changed overnight in terms of shopping patterns and shopping experience. Online, went up, escalated up dramatically. That's the world of AI. Right? It is extremely dependent on data. It is extremely dependent on other things such as what you would do to secure e-commerce, for example. So I started taking a look at that and therefore landed on what are going to be the essential elements of building trustworthy AI. What else do we need besides security? Landed on trustworthy AI, and I have defined 8 essential elements or pillars. And by the way, this is predating the NIST RMF, which came out. And one thing, there are 3 things that are really important. One is businesses have to kind of adopt AI to maintain not only operational efficiencies and competitive advantage, but have to do it with acknowledging and identifying what is the risk. The risk for AI is different from our conventional world, and it includes a very strong layer. If you look at NIST RMF, for example, a very, very strong layer of trustworthiness. And if you're going to define trustworthiness, it is a big list. And what does it include besides security, which goes horizontally, and privacy, are also by the use cases of verticals that will be relevant, such as transparency and explainability, bias. These are things that we have not had to deal with in building out security, conventional security systems. So the world of CISOs is either going to change dramatically in terms of taking on these, elements of what is responsible AI and trustworthy AI, or it'll be a combination of collaborating with, whether it's the chief data officers in the company or other stakeholders who are going to be the missing cogs in making risk management complete for when it comes to AI. So thank you so much for having this panel, Val. Like to start off with a question for Soumya. How can you clarify for everyone what is responsible AI?
Sure. I hope I can do the justice. I know there's a lot of buzzword you may say: responsible AI, trustworthiness, AI safety, AI alignment. So there's a long list of, I guess, terms in this context. But in general, when we talk about responsible AI, we are basically over the past years, I would say over the past decade, responsible AI has been mainly referring to basically mitigating bias in the AI system. It's been about explainability, about improving fairness in the AI system, and also about the accountability. But if something goes wrong, well, who's going to be responsible? In general, that's been basically the concept. If we have to define it, it's basically a governance framework that tries to address and focus in detail how an organization manage and address challenges around development, research, and deployment of AI systems. So over the past couple of years, many big tech companies, name it Google, Microsoft, NVIDIA, Amazon, they all have their own respective responsible AI frameworks, which is basically a series of principles, operating principles that govern how they internally develop these systems and how they deploy them. And they usually, most of the time, not always, but sometimes they share this analysis, they share some of the research and with the bigger community. But the fact is that not all companies, they have these resources to actually build this kind of great responsible AI team. So there have been some other frameworks, as Pamela mentioned, the NIST risk management framework, or the EU trustworthy principles for trustworthy AI. These are also available publicly, that let's say if some other companies, they want to ensure and kind of show their good faith that they are using AI and they are deploying it and using it responsibly, so they have used it, some of these frameworks. But the fact is that I want to get back to how actually this responsible AI comes and has the overlaps with the cybersecurity. I feel like we may need one to kind of maybe decouple them first, because I've learned a lot actually by listening to the folks and experts in the cybersecurity. My understanding is that in the cybersecurity realm, it's all, especially when we talk about either being proactive or, as you guys call it, being in a defensive mode, it seems that it's all focused about bad actors. People who have bad intention try to attack a system, and then basically that's how it's usually the harm happens. However, in a responsible AI field, when we talk about harm, it's usually about good intentioned people who have developed a system that is creating unintentional harms that they have not yet predicted. And now they're trying, most of the times, I would say, there's always exceptions, but so they have trying to figure out, okay, how we are going to address these unintended consequences and harms from AI system. So there is sort of this overlap, but there also sort of a distinction between these two. But my understanding, based on the conversation I'm hearing today, is there is a connection between cybersecurity and AI, and it's a very complex connection, especially recently with all these recent advancements in generative AI. A lot of these attacks, a lot of these actors that have bad intention to attack system, they can leverage this technology to the large language models in any form through the chat, for example, ChatGPT, or their better version of the GPT-4. If you know how to actually use the data repository, the code repository, so you can actually leverage it yourself. You don't even need to subscribe. So those bad actors, they can leverage this AI system and actually do more sophisticated attack. They can collect more information about their target, something that maybe I wouldn't say a standard hacker may not necessarily be able to collect all those information, but this AI system actually enables those complex and more sophisticated attacks. So there is definitely an overlap. And I'm expecting that in the coming years, there's going to be more transparency, and there's going to be more research and understanding about how these two fields is going to be interacting in the coming years, because there's definitely there's a lot of synergies and a lot of overlap.
Thank you. So yes, thank you for delineating that there are two aspects when it comes to securing AI. One is, how do you make AI more secure? And that's a tough challenge. But there's also, how can AI be used for generating attacks, and how do you protect from AI? And for that, I'd like to ask Errol to kind of weigh in on, what are some of the things that you're seeing in the healthcare industry?
Okay, great. So, so thinking about it from the positive point first, some of the exciting innovation that's happening in healthcare, we're looking at things like better imaging results, people visiting their physicians, they're getting improved diagnostics, earlier detection of serious diseases, cancer, kidney disease, things of that sort, more effective treatment plans for complex diseases, robotics that are being used for surgery, for example. I think the most exciting one that I was learning about was actually improving patient engagement. So using AI to get the patient to take an active role in their treatment plan as well, and the AI helping, adapting, getting the patient more involved along the way as well. So really need advancements there. But as we kind of alluded to and already started talking about some of the adversarial use, the first thing everybody starts thinking about is, well, yeah, I mean, the bad guys can start using the AI, LLMs, et cetera, to generate more believable phishing emails, correct grammar, all of that. Things that we're teaching our users to try to avoid clicking on phishing emails. And I've constantly said, we have to do a better job of stopping the delivery of crappy emails like that, first off, as security professionals, but of course that doesn't protect our users at home. So how are they going to protect themselves from things like that? But then it gets even worse, right? Because we've seen things like deep fake technology, right, voice cloning, facial pattern recognition, things of that sort. So if the AI can learn that, I think that the authentication vendors are probably shaking in their shoes, or at least they should be at this point, right, thinking about what the long-term impact of that is going to be on their products now in the security space as well. Can AI pull off a successful interactive conversation with somebody in order to fool them? And just, again, thinking about not just even from the authentication standpoint, but all the scams, right? If I sound like the CEO of a corporation calling up the direct reports and telling them to do something, would they believe that it was the CEO talking to them? Or vice versa, maybe a scammer calling an elderly person and trying to convince them that they are their granddaughter and they just got arrested and they need money sent to Mexico. Typical stuff like that, but a lot more convincing. So we're certainly seeing things like that as well. But again, more to the point with AI, things that we're also that are being talked about, demonstrations that we've seen already happening with AI poisoning, for example. So again, can you teach the LLM, for example, things that that could be used maliciously, or things that it could be that will alter the decision making of the AI? So as I mentioned earlier about the wonderful advancements that have been made in imaging and diagnostic early detection, could you then alter that algorithm to potentially misdiagnose people as well? And so we're seeing examples of things like that happening today. And then finally, just the whole topic of AI hallucination. I'll just bring that up. Fancy term, in my estimation, for just the AI making mistakes and establishing things as fact or making decisions that are not based on accurate information.
Thank you. So I'd like to give an example actually of authentication with deep fakes that can, that might kind of resonate with the cybersecurity audience. So one of the, this is a actual use case in a bank where, or anyone who has a customer care center and a client center, you call it. A lot of the authentication is handled initially by chatbots, and the authentication is based on things such as voice, as well as the phone number you're calling from, which we know can be easily spoofed. We had done training a deepfake voice for Elon Musk, actually, a known figure, to take a look at, how it took us a week to create a fake audio sample that sounded just like Elon Musk. Today's AI tools, such as DALL-E, such as diffusion, where you have the ability for text to voice generation, for example, and very, very, very high quality of generation of voice, where the nuances, the hesitations, all the intonation, etc., are captured so well that you really cannot differentiate. Guess how long that takes today with the tools that we have, and very indiscernible to the human ear, especially. Took us 40 hours for the Elon Musk one that that was a year ago. Just throw out a guess. How long do you think? How sophisticated the tools are, which are free tools that we have at our power today, at our disposal today.
40 minutes.
Very close. So 10 times less? 3 minutes. And this is not even me cloning my voice. This is me writing the text and then generating the person that you're targeting. If you can get a sample from a podcast, for example, where there's no background noise, that's a perfect example. Video, Zoom calls, video meeting calls, etc. So that's the world we are entering today for a CISO to take a look at, not just authentication for how it is happening in an organization, for example, but what are the controls you're going to put in place where you're not going to authenticate someone just by those two things alone. And that is actually a use case and a practical flow that is happening today, where authentication of a client is happening with the help of a chatbot, with voice as well as phone numbers. Okay, so that is a very real threat, right? We have to look at how are we making our AI systems, building them to be more secure, more resilient, and how do we prevent them for malicious use? Let me go to on that subject, Somaya, to talk about the Canadian automated decision-making regulation that has been there for a while.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. The directive on automated decision making, which is not actually a regulation, is basically a directive that applies for all federal department and institution, and it came to effect as a mandatory tool in 2019, but the development I think started around 2018 or later 2017. So as part of this directive, all the departments or a federal agency that they use AI system using administrative data and use an AI system, machine learning, basically even a machine learning model. And recently they have reviewed the directive and expanded the scope. So some of the statistical modeling as well falls into that category. If they use any of these new techniques to make a decision in any sort of decision making on especially in the service delivery, they need to comply with this directive. As part of this directive, the departments, they have to fill out a questionnaire, which is an algorithmic impact assessment, which is basically a questionnaire with a series of questions that evaluates an AI system, the AI that basically the entire project from various categories, and tries to understand better what sort of data is used, what is the scope of the project, what's the decision that is made by this AI system, is the decision reversible, what other options that the clients have in terms of if they don't want to use this AI system. So there is a series of questions that allows to better understand this AI system and how it works and what are the impact of that system. And according to those questions, it gives a sort of a risk score to that. And they depend on where it falls. There are some systems that they have basically zero impact, is mainly for research purposes. For example, NRC or NRCan, I don't recall, they have systems that they use for measuring the metal intensity in the rock. So this does not create a lot of, you may say, does not create a lot of risk. So this usually falls on a very low risk. But if they fall on a medium or high risk, or even low risk, there's no risk and low, medium, and high. So there is a series of mitigation strategy that departments, they have to comply. One of those, the first one is to do peer review. So they have to ask another university, academic institution, another research group to evaluate and basically go through and audit that model. So there's also another way of kind of maybe looking to see, put in place other options if using this may have some unintentional harm for the clients that may use it. So this has been an important guardrail for all the federal departments and agencies, that if they experiment with it, it's okay, but when it comes to actually using it for any sort of decision making, they have to comply. And if they cannot, they cannot comply with the directive, basically they cannot use it. But that's mainly for the federal institutions. But Canada itself is trying to build a regulation for AI, because as I'm just going to go back again to what I mentioned about those responsible AI frameworks. So those frameworks, they are not mandatory. They are not legally enforced to these companies. They are voluntary frameworks that the companies, they decide to use to show their good faith. However, and there's no specific benchmark to evaluate, okay, how good they are doing. They just report on some of those measures, but how can we know if they are doing good or not? So that's where the regulation comes into place, to basically create that benchmark and evaluate all that with the same framework, with the same sort of criteria. And in Canada, there's Digital Charter Act that was, I believe, tabled last year by the Minister of Innovation and Science, and it has 3 elements in it. The first one is the Consumer Privacy and Protection Act. The second one, they're going to update the PIPEDA. PIPEDA stands for, I think, I don't remember exactly what is there. It's basically the main regulation that covers the cybersecurity as well. So it has all the privacy, anything regarding the data privacy, data protection falls under that regulation. And that's going to be updated to incorporate the consequences of using AI system by private sector. And the last part of that act, new Charter Act, is the AI Act, which is a brand new regulation. Once it comes into place, that's going to be applicable for all the private and public sector in Canada. So these are currently what's happening in Canada in terms of how to kind of hold those companies and hold Canadian departments and eventually the private sector responsible if they are using AI. But globally, as Pamela mentioned, the NIST Institute, they are also doing those framework. European Commission is being the avant-garde in this. They started building the AI Act a few years ago, and right now in June 2023, a few months ago, they approved it, and now they are starting this trial process to start turning it into legislation. So it's a long road when it comes to regulation. It's heavy machinery, and there's there's eventually comes into place. But it seems that the governments and the countries, they are realizing that to standardize how we're going to make sure that AI is secure, AI doesn't create harms, unintentional harms. So that's the way to go. So yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Okay, thank you. Well, did you want to add anything about the CFF focus on?
Yeah, I think as this is probably exactly teeing off from where this long road goes, right? So it takes time to build frameworks and standards, which is the right way to do things, right? And it's also long-ranging impact. However, as these are being built, the technology is being built faster and moving faster than by the time we reach an agreement on standardization, maybe we're ready for something else. And that's what we are trying to identify and address. Again, this is very reactive. I think we don't have anything proactively that we can do. The only thing that we can probably do proactively is make sure that processes are consistent. We have with the ability to have a framework. I mean, in my case, for my organization, we have picked up NIST RMF as a framework and deploying it with respect to assessing with respect to the risk management framework, because it's risk management, right? Ultimately, it's a risk for us. And we have, our program is built on NIST CSF, cybersecurity framework, which is, along with ISO is globally recognized now. So with these two, armed with these two, we can at least get started. I'm not saying that we are fully prepared and this journey will take us some time, but having an assessment process, having a framework to assess on, especially on the risk management side, having an assessment, building a program or adjusting the controls based on that, and then rolling out, that has to happen in quick succession. And in the last 3 months, my experience has been that you have, especially in the vantage point from where I have, we have 3,000 engineers in our team, and these 3,000 engineers, they are gung-ho about, okay, I'll use Copilot, I'm going to use, for documentation, I'm going to use ChatGPT, and from day one, they started, right? Before we could even turn on the controls or even agree on what the controls are going to be. However, very quickly, we use the same controls that we have been using for data security, for our endpoint protection, for our perimeter security controls, to make sure that we know who's using and how they're using it, right? So confining that blast radius to the limited group of users that are going to be, monitored for some time and their usage. The other thing I think is consequential in this fact, in this whole process is, there is code being developed by AI, and we have a way to secure code. Secure coding is a completely different thing, but securing the code as data, that is another issue. And I think even in AI development, right? Code as AI, code as data is a very novel concept.
Right.
And whether it address, it has both challenges in terms of the IP that you have for software engineers or product that is built, and in terms of reuse. So once you endorse some sort of code, and if it's not good, it can go into the perpetual memory of AI and being used, whether it's vulnerability or it's just wrong or it's bias or unethical practices. I mean, all of that can be institutionalized very, very quickly. And I think that's a problem that needs to be solved. So the way we are addressing this is, choosing a framework that is tied to risk management, not necessarily particular security controls, but risk management, working with legal to make sure that we are at least, circumspect about the legal implications now, data privacy included, and then, coordinating with business to slowly, increase the access, right? So I think these are the 3 things that we are doing reactively. And with this working group, we hope we can, very quickly, incrementally release a package that, folks like me can use without, trying to fiddle around and find out themselves.
Thank you. Yes, I totally agree that there are risk management frameworks mentioned NIST. There's also ISO standards, right, that were baked very quickly, but they are ready now. which address AI risk management as well as trustworthiness. So this is extremely fast development for ISO, but we are there, right? So there is hope, there is guidance, and also in terms of regulations. I never thought would say that as a security professional. Always shunned getting regulated, and we, didn't really want to align with that because we felt it watered down or diluted the security posture because you're just going for meeting compliance to regulations. But in this case, if you look at the EU AI Act, I feel it's really a good one to kind of have at the back of your mind as to what you can expect becoming the gold standard. So it is good guidance, and it is extremely, I think we are going to be welcoming it, in other words, in this case. So we don't have an option of just saying, no, we were talking about this yesterday. The panel talked about the CISO response to, well, no, you cannot do this, or shut off generative AI. I don't think that's a good option. A better one is to prepare your organizations to adopt the enterprise rollout of these technologies in a safe way, because you know your business, and there's definitely business contextual guardrails that you can create, and don't have to wait for regulations, because EU AI Act, even though it does seem promising, it's not till next year, and then there are always there's conflicting acceptance around that as well. Aaron, would you like to add?
Yeah, I just to add on to Val's points, I think he definitely covered a lot of great areas there, and from what I'm seeing, like even in the health sector, hospitals that are again, also to Pamela's point, embracing the use of AI. You can't ignore it. People are already out there using it. So what I see them doing is actually creating these cross-functional governance teams to try to make sure that they've at least got a singular point within the organization to try to stay on top of all of these developments and to ensure that people are implementing AI properly, and that that they're looking at the models, that they're reviewing biases that may be baked into the model itself, that there are accountability paths as well that you mentioned, the trustworthiness and what's coming out of the models, what decisions are being used coming out of the models. Is there a human that's also double checking the guidance that's coming out of the model, for example, and how are people using it in the organization? And then with that in place, again, also establishing best practices within the hospital environment. Also see them working closely with organizations like privacy, compliance, and legal, again, making sure that all of those, all of the right decisions are being made there with respect to the implementation. Just one final thing I'll just say on regulation is, as we've all been watching this, and certainly, Canada making great strides, EU coming along, making progress there. The reading that I just did literally 1 or 2 nights ago with respect to what's happening in the US kind of scares me a little bit in terms of the fact that they want to be able to create an independent oversight body to oversee any companies that are using AI. So I think good luck with that. I'm a little bit of a skeptic. And then the second one was that the act would create a private right of action against companies that breach any privacy, violate civil rights, or cause other harms. So welcome to America, the litigious society of the planet. And I just see the lawyers staying busy suing people because they violated one of those issues.
I think to your point, we can circumvent that by showing, as we've done with incident response plans, right? These are the proactive measures we have taken in place, because good luck to the lawyers who do come after, because these are not going to be easy to have a very linear tracking, So I think we'll open it up for questions now, unless we've already exceeded our time.
Thanks. Just a clarifying question on the example that you used of, the fake of the voice of a person, or the faked image. Isn't that covered in existing case law and statute, under fraud or a extension of copyright or something. I mean, isn't at least the use of with the intent to deceive as opposed to satire, wouldn't that be easily criminalized?
Yeah, it's not voice our own IP.
And then a kind of a counterpoint to that is
Voice is not your own IP in a public setting. You have no expectation of privacy speaking here, the video here, or anything of the ilk.
right.
It's
And
already a crime record whether they use a fake picture or not. Just
right. So your voice, public, but then if somebody constructs a message using your image and voice, that's what I'm getting at. And then the counterpoint is, what about law enforcement? So, putting a undercover officer in a criminal organization is well established and so forth. Is there any discussion or thought in the industry of like using a faked image voice of a criminal to, does that verge on entrapment if you're using?
So yes, so this is not a use case for the bank or a customer care center. This is fraudulent, definitely, with the intent for committing fraud. But speaking to law enforcement in Amsterdam, actually, I was talking to. She leads it's called synthetic media. It's not called. They're not even calling it deep fakes. She's the one. I forget her name. I'm sorry about that. I can, talk to me if you were interested in contacting her. But law enforcement is very much on top of this digital fraud, and in some of the countries where they're tracking it very closely, in terms of how are not only deep fakes, as we're calling deep fakes, what they're calling synthetic media, but also things such as spamming or denial of service attacks, from a completely different nature. So we were talking about LLMs earlier, for example. If you are talking about confusing an LLM for, putting it out of operation for answering a particular query, spamming it by, putting in a couple of terms repeatedly so that it starts ignoring them, but that is extremely useful and is definitely part of a business outcome that, is part of the use case. So those are the kind of things that, if you really dive down, I didn't even cover things such as what are the attacks that are go beyond data poisoning. When you talk to most of the security organizations in companies today, when they talk about AI attacks, they think about data poisoning. But there is a whole slew of attacks, including what is relevant for the automotive industry, for example, the cyber physical systems, where they're trained on certain data, for example, and a hacker could just shine a light, for example. That's a very common example on a stoplight. So the car is not even detecting that as a stop sign anymore, or doing a complete subversion and a malicious, or making it a speed limit of 55. So instead of stopping, you're going faster. So yes, there is, I don't want to scare anyone, right? There is so much when you start looking into the attacks that are possible and that are actually being, tested out. I wouldn't even know where to stop, So I think I'll just stop here. But yeah, that's not a business use case. That's definitely a fraudulent use case.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Sumit.
Not an answer to a question for sure, but a comment that I like to leave it here in the audience and us as a community in AI and in cyber. It's about misinformation. So a developer may develop a deep fake model of voice, the face, and may not use it, just use it for personal kind of training. But once that deep fake model, that deep fake video or voice is shared, and that's when it starts to create harm in so many different shape and forms that could be even in the form of a cyber attack came eventually. But that's the challenge currently. And right now, the generative AI advances is gonna make this even harder and want to make it even easier. So it's very much, I think it's a responsibility of all of us to look for, first of all, for misinformation, especially that this comes into this community a lot. And I feel like this is not just, it's definitely a technical concept, but I feel like it needs to be a system-based approach to all of this, because there is this ethic part of it and there's this tech part of it. Ethics comes about, okay, what are we using it, what data we use, but it also the technical part of it, because we have an engineering solution that it comes to appear in a social context. So there's a lot around it and there's a lot of unknown around it. So it's a very, very complex, I would say, ecosystem that I feel it's upon all of us to learn as we go and learn as much as we can and educate ourselves as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. That would looking at what is possible, right? We haven't even talked about quantum, right? And quantum and AI, they're calling it QAI, but holds a lot of promise on what it can do. For example, route optimization is a problem that has eluded and is extremely beneficial. So you think about your courier systems, for example, or taking car services, for example. Route optimization is a very, very beneficial problem that has still not been solved, so, to the degree it can be. And that's where quantum and AI can really help solve that. So we have to focus on, I think, the positive outcomes, but we can't get there if we have that proactive RMF approach to emerging risk and emerging technology, and really not be taken by surprise, because we do have some things in place.
Yeah, thank you.
So thank you. This is a fantastic discussion to be continued. Thank you, Somaya and Pamela, for carrying the torch on this one. I'm sure this to be continued. And Tom, to your question on the law enforcement, I think we have a very solid law enforcement panel to close this event this afternoon. I think we should ask this question there as well, right? Okay. Thank you so much. So we'll break for lunch. And reconvene at 12:30. Okay. Thank you.